Hello friends, welcome to a quiet voyage through depth and breath. Tonight, hold a single riddle with you tonight. A small car heart, a bus-length body. How can a pulse so slow keep such a traveler alive and effortless? In the blue hush, it falls to only a few beats a minute, and still every cell is fed on time. What secret stores does the muscle keep? What pathways guide heat away without cooling the core? Which notes in the lowest register find listeners an ocean away? Tonight, we'll gently unravel these unhurried yet powerful mysteries, softly, step by step. Let's follow that pulse until the ocean itself begins to speak. Blue whale, the largest animal known in Earth's history, reaching 30 meters in length and more than 150 tons in mass. Its voice sits mostly under 40 hertz, felt as a pressure before it's heard, and measured at intensities that rival a jet engine underwater. Each call can carry across vast basins when conditions align, turning ocean into auditorium. The body that makes that sound is engineered for distance. A streamlined torso reduces drag. A small dorsal fin stabilizes without cost. Enormous flukes, wider than a room, deliver thrust with slow, powerful strokes. During a foraging season, a single adult can consume many tons of Antarctic krill in a day, using baleen plates to filter clouds of prey from seawater during high-speed lunges. Energy from those dense meals fuels migrations that can span thousands of kilometers between polar feeding grounds and temperate breeding regions. Inside, physiology slows to save oxygen. When diving, the heart rate can fall to only a few beats per minute, while oxygen-rich myoglobin in deep red muscles holds a reserve far beyond ours. Lungs collapse safely as pressure rises, with flexible ribs folding inward to protect delicate tissues. Each system conserves, directs, and reuses. Even the blow is economical. A vertical plume that can reach the height of a building, announcing a surface interval that lasts moments before another descent. Their skin carries distinct mottling, pale grays and slate blues that make every individual identifiable through photographs. Lifespans extend many decades, judged by earplug layers that accumulate with time. Scars record encounters with ice, predators long ago, and ships in modern seas. Behind the grandeur lies fragility. Populations once plummeted under industrial whaling, then began a slow recovery when the killing stopped. In the blue quiet after these facts, the ocean feels wider. Let your shoulders soften. Let the next detail arrive like a tide that never hurries, and drift with it. If this hush helped you slow down, carry it forward, like, share, and subscribe, so it finds night owls, students, and wanderers who need a gentle guide. Pearl-colored dawn lies low over an open reach of water, and a long back lifts as if the sea itself were taking a measured breath. The creature beneath that surface is not only vast, it is precisely arranged for distance, buoyancy, and quiet handling. Density aligns closely with seawater, so flotation asks little of muscle. Instead of wasting power to stay high, the body rests in neutral balance and invests effort only when direction or depth must change. Shapes reveal purpose: a tapered rostrum that avoids sudden pressure spikes, a dorsal fin set far astern like a discrete keel, flippers that are slim, elongated control surfaces tuned for roll rather than thrust. The eye sits modestly along the head, no larger than a calf's fist, reminding us that vision is not the main instrument here. The ocean offers other gauges. Scale often misleads on land, where weight collects in joints and gravity punishes bulk. In water, mass travels along lift and drag curves, so the whale can be larger than any terrestrial body and still move with economy. The head occupies a striking fraction of length, housing the filtration architecture that defines feeding. From the upper jaw hang ranks of keratin, the same material as hair and nails, grown as plates and frayed into dense fringes. When water is forced outward after a gulp, those fringes catch prey like a velvet sieve. Because the mouth must sometimes become a temporary reservoir, the lower throat wears pleats that can spread wide, then recoil without tearing. The outer skin is surprisingly thin, a flexible film over tough connective sheets and insulating blubber. That thinness helps boundary layers stay attached during modest turns, trimming drag where every fraction matters. Color confuses cameras and eyes alike. Under gray skies, the flanks resemble marbled steel, swirled with pale flecks. In bloom-rich seas, diatom films tint the sides greenish, a traveler's stain that scrubs away in leaner water. Identification catalogs rely on these mosaics, plus dorsal nicks and fluke edge patterns, to track individuals across years. Those images show the same low profile over and over: a long back breaking the surface, a modest fin, a white spout leaning with the wind. Experienced observers read direction from that leaning plume and read intent from surfacing rhythm. The interval between breaths is a quiet sentence in an alphabet of pauses. Growth traces a curve from urgency to stewardship. Calves begin immense by any land standard and grow on milk so rich it seems like liquid winter stores. Early months are about adding length and girth at remarkable rates. Later years are about durable tissue, tendon strength, and the long maintenance of a traveling life. Skeletal geometry records the job description. Vertebrae interlock to resist flexion that would waste energy. The pelvis is reduced to little vestiges tucked deep inside, no longer needed for legs, but still echoing a history that once walked. Along the jaw joint, the architecture tolerates wide gapes without dislocating. Along the ventral groove borders, fiber directions switch like woven cloth, so strain runs into the strongest rails. Surface pace can quicken when needed, but ordinary travel favors a slower, steadier cadence. Energy is stored as fat and as glycogen, but the real savings come from the absence of waste. No abrupt starts, no needless roll, no showy splashes. Even a breath is engineered for speed. Spent air leaves quickly and completely. Fresh air arrives in a single draw through paired blowholes, armored by muscular valves. The entire cycle lasts moments. Then the body tilts down and the surface smooths behind the flukes as if someone ironed the sea. Environmental clothing shifts with place. In polar summers, cold water draws heat out of any exposed edge. The blubber layer answers with insulation and with a role as an energy bank. In temperate corridors, the same layer supports long passages between rich grounds. Even the skin's microtexture plays a part. A faint pattern of microscopic ridges influences near-surface flow, shaving slivers of resistance that multiply over miles. At this scale, 0.1% becomes a fortune. We think of giant things as clumsy. The metaphor fails here. Imagine a city street packed with parked cars to a far corner. Then add one more car's length you cannot see. Imagine that mass lifting almost without bow wave and passing your field of view in a single, even line. The animal does not advertise its effort. The ocean writes the grammar around it. A brief plume, a low arc, a dark ridge curving into blue. The rest is accounting done inside. How much speed to buy, how much depth to borrow, how much time to spend between breaths. For the watcher, the line gliding forward is enough. For the whale, it is a solved equation, repeated for years. Moving oxygen across a body this long is not a matter of force. It is a matter of timing. During deep foraging, the heart's cadence slows until beats feel like islands in a broad sea of silence. Near the surface, the tempo climbs as exchange becomes possible again. Large elastic arteries smooth each pulse into a steadier pressure, protecting distant branch vessels from surges that would waste energy or damage fragile beds. Total blood volume is immense relative to mammal norms, a reservoir that carries not just red cells but also thermal loads and chemical messages between working parts. Muscle, however, holds the decisive cache. Pigments bind oxygen directly within the fibers, keeping a local reserve that does not depend on immediate delivery. As work proceeds, and the chemistry in those fibers shifts, carbon dioxide rising, acidity changing oxygen detaches precisely where it is most needed. The effect is a relay, deep stores handing to surface flows, then taking on fresh charge when the lungs refill. Because the diving body must protect itself from pressure, architecture helps. The thorax includes articulations that allow the chest to yield inward, and the lungs are built to compress in an orderly way, so gas relocates to reinforced pockets. Collapse is not failure, it is protection, limiting nitrogen absorption and sheltering delicate alveolar surfaces from stress during descent and ascent. The airway sits at the crown, not the face. Paired blowholes close under muscular control, forming seals that tolerate depth. The food path remains separate, so the mouth can open to engulf prey without risking aspiration. That separation matters during the violent accelerations of feeding, when any confusion between water and air could be costly. Heat flushed from working tissues must go somewhere. Countercurrent pathways in the fins and along deep vessels shuttle warmth toward places where it can dissipate without chilling the core. In frigid layers, those shunts clamp down to conserve. In milder zones, they relax to keep the engine from overheating. Deep within the canal that houses the spine and in cranial chambers around the brain, tight networks of vessels act like hydraulic buffers. Pressure pulses and motion-induced shifts flatten into manageable changes before they reach fragile structures. The effect resembles a shock absorber system distributed through the most vulnerable architecture. Hormones ride the same channels, chemicals that ease arteries wider, that prompt splenic contraction to release a bolus of additional red cells at the start of a dive, that call the heart back to low gear as depth increases. The reflex pattern is old and proven. Slow the pump, narrow the periphery to preserve oxygen for the brain and the heart, but scale magnifies the need for choreography, so chambers empty and fill in exact sequence. At the surface, the exchange is brief and complete. Spent air leaves in a strong burst that clears dead space. Fresh air enters in a single inhale. The lungs' thin membranes and enormous internal area allow rapid diffusion, so a few seconds suffice before gravity and momentum aim the head down again. A breath is merely a reset. The true work continues in silence below the glitter line. Down there, muscles burn fuel at rates that match available oxygen, delaying anaerobic bursts for the moments when a lunge demands it. The economy shows up in the glide phases that stretch between strokes, and in the avoidance of needless posture shifts that would invite drag. No part of this engine is ornamental. The ribs' hinge angles, the thickness of vessel walls, the electrical timing across a heart as big as a chair, each has been sculpted by season after season of selective pressure. Failures would not leave much archaeology. Success leaves a traveling blueprint that repeats across oceans. The result is a moving fortress that plays gentle with its own margins. Where a smaller animal might sprint, then pant, then sprint again, this body chooses long reach and careful returns to baseline. Picture a paper fan opened by a patient hand and folded again. The arc the same each time, no wasted flutter. In that rhythm, the whale stays within budgets that keep a life running for decades. The surface records none of the arithmetic, only a plume that fades, a glow of skin just below the light, and the feeling that the sea has resumed its quiet pulse. A silver band of subsurface shimmer wavers above a broad feeding ground, and the long body angles toward a chosen ribbon within it. Feeding by lunging looks like impulse, but it begins with survey and selection. Prey, here, swarming crustaceans, the size of a fingertip, do not obey tidy lines. They gather in filaments and clouds shaped by internal decisions and by currents. Instruments show those clouds as streaks and patches. A practiced forager finds the fattest parcel, aligns its path with the prey's drift, and commits at the last moment. The lower jaw opens, and the throat's pleats unfold, turning the front of the body into a temporary bag to the volume of a small pool. Water rushes in, carrying an abundance measured in millions of tiny bodies. Elastic tissues in the floor of the mouth and the reinforced outer sheath stretch, storing potential energy like a spring. As the jaws close, that stored energy rebounds, and the tongue rises, forcing water outward through the baleen fringe. Flow paths are guided by grooves in the palate and by lip edges that reduce turbulence. The bristled inner rim of each plate acts as fine mesh. Liquid departs, food remains, and a rolling wave of prey moves toward the throat to be swallowed. Because feeding cycles must happen quickly to pay for their cost, the filter resets in moments, and the whale prepares for another pass if the parcel remains rich. Costs add up in physics. Opening a huge mouth at speed multiplies drag, decelerating the body abruptly. Chasing scattered prey would waste fuel. Field tags reveal that animals time their lunges to intersect the densest core of a swarm, align their approach angles to minimize braking, turn penalties, and space their sequences to allow recovery glides between accelerations. The best patches offer layers compacted by light and current, where a few precise lunges yield more energy than a dozen clumsy ones. Deep targets demand still sharper choices, because the ascent to breathe lengthens, raising the price of each attempt. Night and day move the buffet up and down. In darkness, prey ascend to feed on microscopic plants near the surface. Under high sun, they retreat to dimmer bands. The forager follows those movements with its whole schedule, changing average depth across hours and sometimes abandoning an area entirely when wind-driven mixing or eddies thin the layers. The filtration hardware adapts across the season too. Plates grow continuously from the gum line and wear at the free edge, maintaining a working fringe that stays effective despite abrasion from prey and flow. Lengths approach impressive spans for this species, and density of the inner hairs is tuned to hold small crustaceans while letting water pass freely. Beyond the throat, the gut handles a meal framed in chitin and protein. Stomach chambers with different chemistry take turns reducing the bolus, while enzymes adapted to cold intake scale their rates to flows that may carry chill down from the mouth. The bloodstream receives fats and sugars at speeds that match what muscles and maintenance can use. Excess stores accumulate quietly under the skin, where they will serve as insulation and fuel in leaner months. On days when fronts concentrate prey and weather allows repeated cycles, the ledger turns comfortably positive. On days when storms shred layers or warm rings push resources deep and thin, the ledger tightens and the whale switches to searching travel, scanning other corridors where the sea might have piled food against a slope. Hydrodynamics leave visible marks on form. The pleats do not spread uniformly. Their geometry distributes strain like the folds of a concertina designed to open large and close without buckling. Jaw joints guide the opening path so soft tissue does not pinch, and tiny sensory hairs along the lip margin likely provide tactile cues when the mouth edge brushes the cloud. Sometimes the body banks into the lunge, flippers set as steadying wings. Sometimes the path is straight, Braking accomplished mostly by the vast increase in frontal area as the mouth balloons. In a tag's acceleration trace, each cycle looks like a sharp mountain, followed by a long slope. The sprint and the glide, held in proportion by the filter's capacity. A season of good water can rewrite a body's condition. Females banking energy for reproduction add stores that will later be translated into milk. Males banking energy for long crossings do the same without the cost of nursing, but none of it is guaranteed. Competition from birds, fish, and other whales can strip a patch. Alternating climate patterns can shift fronts hundreds of kilometers. The clock of daylight can compress the window when layers are compactest. Flexibility remains the central tool. The lunge is not a fixed routine, but a decision engine that weighs density, depth, and distance to air against the budget for the next hour. Imagine a heavy book, opened just wide enough to catch a handful of falling leaves, then closed before the breeze steals them. The hinge is strong, the motion precise, the timing exact because imprecision would simply scatter wealth back into the water. The whale repeats the sequence not because it is dramatic, but because, done correctly, it is the least expensive way to turn a moving cloud of life into the fuel that keeps a very large traveler on its road. Communication for this species lives at the edge of human hearing and often below it, built from tones that take seconds to unfold and longer to fade. The phrases recur in ordered cycles, motifs a listener could learn to anticipate even without understanding their content. Males assemble these sequences with regional signatures that drift gradually over years. When researchers lay spectrograms from different populations side by side, they find pattern families, stairs of harmonics, steady fundamentals, and deliberate gaps where silence carries weight. Propagation improves when calls travel along a natural acoustic highway, a layer within the sea where sound bends back toward the center as it tries to escape upward or downward. In that channel, energy suffers less loss, and a single note can span great distances if background noise stays low. The message content, inferred from context, includes spacing signals that help foragers maintain distance, advertisement phrases likely linked to mating, and contact calls exchanged during migration or in transit between feeding grounds. The overall bandwidth is modest compared with birdsong or dolphin chatter, but the scale of the room is different. These voices are designed for a basin, not a cove. Anatomy routes vibration toward inner ears specialized for faint pressure changes. The lower jaw includes fatty canals that conduct energy to ear bones. The skull's shape and air spaces tune response across the bands the animal uses most. Hearing must remain effective despite the internal rumble of a large engine and the low-frequency movements of the body itself. Evolution's compromise is a system that favors the long note and the patient listener. Calls measured in seconds and minutes are not an excess. They are an adaptation to a medium where time buys distance. Noise complicates all of this. Shipping lanes elevate the floor under the music, shrinking the range at which a partner can hear. In some places, seasonally heavy, traffic overlaps with breeding windows or foraging seasons, forcing animals either to sing more loudly, shift timing, or slide their center frequency. Long archives suggest slow cultural drift layered atop these accommodations, motifs that change over decades and can be used like stamps to identify population identity. Researchers follow those stamps like postal marks, tracking where patterns spread and where they die out. The result resembles a map of dialects written in tones instead of vowels. Context also shapes repertoire. In feeding seasons, when many bodies share the same patchwork of prey, spacing phrases help avoid collisions and interference. During long passages, where travel lanes narrow along coasts or through straits, contact calls, maintain group coherence that visual cues cannot supply. Breeding periods on lower latitude grounds highlight other structures entirely, some with repeating pulses, others with long descending notes that feel like the sea itself letting out a held breath. The point is not variety for its own sake, but reliability. A listener understands what a phrase means because its shape and placement are consistent across time. Technology makes these voices visible to us as ladders and bars, yet the experience at scale is simpler. On the basin's floor, a tone leaves one body and rides a channel for hours. Another body hears a faint line among many lines wind on the surface. Distant storms, the hiss of bubbles, the hum of engines, and answers with an agreed figure. Communication completes not at a moment but across a span, more like exchanging letters than trading shouts. When conditions degrade, storms scatter the sound. Ice cracks, propellers growl. The system does not break so much as contract, and the range of conversation shrinks. Think of a bell carried across a valley after dusk. The tone is spare, the air patient, and the silence between rings says as much as the strike. That is the design here, not compressed syllables or quick flurries, but sustained lines that borrow the sea's steadiness to reach far listeners who will not see the singer for days. In a world that often confuses loud with effective, it is a reminder that the longest signal is sometimes the softest one, perfectly tuned to the room. A pale ring of froth drifts along a sheltered shelf, and just beyond it, a new traveler tests the surface with a tentative roll. Gestation runs close to a year, timing birth for milder waters where a small body loses heat more slowly and seas are less violent. Newborns arrive already imposing by human standards, yet they are still delicate machines. The earliest days depend on milk, whose richness supports gains, measured not in grams, but in heavy daily stacks. Every mouthful carries fats that will become insulation and fuel, and proteins that will become muscle and the connective web that holds it together. The mother's reserves, built far earlier in richer seas, are translated into mass that can survive long crossings ahead. Movement strategy appears immediately. The calf tucks along the flank in a position that borrows the slipstream, a sheltered lane where resistance falls and speed costs less. This echelon draft lets a small tail beat with less expense and steady rhythm, while the adult pays a modest surcharge to carve smoother flow. Surfacing rhythm belongs to the little one, at first quick, frequent visits to air, while internal stores and control systems mature. The adult adapts cadence around that need, sacrificing some of the efficient deep cycles she would prefer. Over weeks, dives extend, and the interval between breaths lengthens, a slow convergence toward the traveling pace the pair will need. Learning unfolds in more than muscle. Sound is a teacher. The calf hears the local phrases of its population, learns their order and spacing, and begins to associate certain motifs with movement and season. The mother's roots carry geography and time as lessons too. The narrow lanes through topography, the offshore arcs that avoid predation, the timing of passes through corridors where food has bloomed in prior years. Some of that wisdom is environmental luck. An eddy forms here one year and elsewhere the next, but much is statistical truth built from many seasons of memory. Threats vary across basins, and social responses follow. In regions where large predators hunt, adults may cluster when a young body is present, placing mass between danger and the calf. Coordinated surfacings make a shifting barrier at the air-water interface. Subsurface, experienced animals hold flanks that deny easy approach. The strategy is not guaranteed, but it buys seconds, and seconds matter when a small lung capacity demands frequent breathing. Elsewhere, disturbance takes the shape of noise or dense traffic. The pair learns to wait out a loud corridor, or to angle offshore where the floor of sound falls and the world becomes readable again. Scientists track these first years in two principal ways. Photo identification traces individuals across summers and winters, piecing together life histories from scars, pigment maps, and dorsal shapes. Genetic sampling, especially along maternal lines, outlines family structure and the larger portrait of population mixing. Together, the records suggest that lessons about roots and timing travel through mothers as much as through maps of currents and temperature. When a lineage disappears from a seasonal bay that once held it, the silence can last for generations. When it returns, it often does so with the daughters of a survivor who remembers a road that worked. Growth slows as adolescence nears. The curve that pointed straight up in early months flattens into maintenance lines where mass shifts from simply adding bulk to tuning tissue quality. Reproductive maturity arrives after years, and first births later still for many females. Those births recapitulate the economy that underwrites the whole cycle. Rich feeding far from nursery water, long fasting interludes while nursing, and careful budgeting of travel along lanes that minimize wasted cost. The calf that once borrowed a slipstream becomes the body that carves one. Imagine a small boat tucked in the lee of a steady hull as wind stiffens. The body shelter is not an accident. It is design set by physics and kept by instinct. The voyage that follows looks simple to an eye on shore. Two shapes, rising and falling in patient alternation. But inside those shapes are budgets and memories, a ledger opened by one generation and balanced by the next. The sea writes no certificate for completion. It offers only the lanes, the weather, and the time to learn them. For the very young, time is bought from a mother's stores and defended by her choices. For the pair together, the road ahead is long enough to feel like a kind of home. Slate light spreads along high latitudes, and the long roads open where cold water fractures into lanes of light. Feeding grounds cluster along continental margins and ice edges, where currents squeeze plankton into ribbons and krill stack in bands that matter to giants. When daylight shortens in the far south, many bodies leave the Antarctic rim and angle toward temperate belts, not in a parade, but in staggered departures tied to prey and condition. Archival tags have traced arcs running thousands of kilometers. Some sweep along the subantarctic front, cross persistent eddies that shepherd life, then drift toward lower latitude corridors where calves arrive in comparatively gentle seas. In the North Pacific, the picture fragments into distinct habits. Some whales feed in the Gulf of Alaska, where downwelling shelves generate food, then pass along the spine of the California Current to winter off Baja and Central America. Others hold farther west, using the Aleutians, the Bering Slope, or the Kuril-Kamchatka region, and later descend toward subtropical gyre margins where storms are weaker and neonatal heat loss is milder. The routes are not rules. They are preferences reinforced by years of returns that worked. Movement speeds shift with purpose. During active foraging, tracks kink and slow as dives cluster over good bands. During transit, paths straighten and daily distance climbs. When rest intrudes, the surface rhythm lengthens between breaths, and forward progress softens to conserve stores. Those stores are built, in the south especially, by weeks of dense feeding, when daylight and wind produce a short season of abundance along the ice margin. Pregnant females carry a second timeline inside them. Their energy ledgers must finance fetal growth, migration, birth, early nursing, and the long return to food months later. The margin for error narrows for them, and their departing windows often sit earlier on the calendar. Navigation blends several instruments. Near the surface, sun position anchors bearings when clouds break. At depth, gradients of temperature and sound speed outline familiar layers like lanes on a dark highway. The seafloor offers shape, ridges, canyons, and continental slopes that slope the same way every year. Subtle sensitivity to geomagnetic structure detected indirectly through organs that convert field changes to neural signals adds a stable reference frame that does not depend on visibility. Memory stitches these cues into maps. A juvenile that followed a mother through a strait or along a shelf break holds those frames and later returns alone with confidence that looks like instinct. Contact persists across distance through low voices. Very low-frequency phrases can ride the deep sound channel and cross basins when background noise is kind. A traveler entering a long corridor may hear familiar motifs well before sight offers anything but water. Spacing phrases help several bodies share a route without collision. Contact calls offered at intervals keep a loose convoy coherent in swells that hide everything at the surface but a breath. The cadence of those breaths varies with depth range and sea state. Watchers from low decks learn to read it. A series of short intervals when dives are shallow, slower punctuation when depths increase, a single lingering pause when a body turns under and the dorsal slips away. Hazards sit on the same roads. Modern shipping has drawn fixed lanes across many coastal routes. Hulls move fast, and low silhouettes hide a whale until the distance is spent. Speed reductions in known hotspots reduce strike risk markedly, and shifting lanes a few miles offshore or shoreward can move metal away from the densest corridors. Where those measures align with updated sightings and tag data, the benefit is immediate. Where maps lag the whales by a year or two, corridors miss and accidents return. Entanglement risk rises in regions of heavy fixed gear, especially where ropes ride, high in the water column. The physics is not kind to large bodies. A single loop around a fluke or jaw can add drag that steals energy on a long passage, leaving less for the critical periods to come. Climate rearranges roads in slow motion. Krill distributions respond to sea ice extent, wind patterns, and the timing of spring blooms. Warm anomalies push fronts poleward or break them into eddies that drift away from shelves that once concentrated prey. In years like that, migrants depart later or travel farther to find the same density lines, and the wintering grounds receive arrivals across a wider window. In the north, oscillations in upwelling strength adjust, feeding success along the California current. In the west, shifts in the Oyashio-Kuroshio boundary alter productivity on the subarctic flanks. The whales adapt at the scale of a lifetime, turning a little sooner, holding a little longer, exploring a side corridor that paid 2 seasons in a row. But the cultural consistency remains visible as an overall scaffold. Arrivals recur in the same months often enough that coastal watchers plan their own calendars by those returns. History left gaps on these roads. Commercial hunts once removed the very animals most likely to encode and transmit route knowledge, the largest, oldest females that had led multiple migrations. Populations shrank, and corridors went quiet, yet the memory that survived proved resilient. Catalogues built decades later show recurring use of traditional lanes and seasonal bays by new generations. Where a lineage vanished entirely from a small wintering cove, reoccupation sometimes required immigrants whose mothers held a similar map from a neighboring line. The pattern is not romantic, it is practical. Roads tested by many seasons offer fewer bad surprises, and bodies that follow them face fewer invisible costs. Biology budgets every kilometer. During southbound or northbound transits, fat reserves decline in step with distance and sea state. Rough weather multiplies the price of forward motion. Currents can either add gifted miles or present a treadmill that drains stores, while charts insist progress was made. Some animals exploit boundary currents, riding the edge where cold and warm meet, so the flow itself contributes to the day's total. Others take straight lines across gyres at the expense of variety, betting that a long, even course will cost less than a meander along coasts that add detours. The choice may depend on starting condition. A whale, leaving with deep, rich reserves, can afford a wider search for the best lane. A lean traveler favors certainty and rest where waves allow. Along the way, physiology reorders itself into travel mode. Dive depths shallower on average than foraging days keep costs moderate. Breathing sequences grow regular and short. The huge mouth stays mostly closed, reducing drag, except when a brief, opportunistic feed presents a tight, obvious patch. Calves tucked in echelon at the mother's flank learn the motor pattern of long-distance life. Steady tail beats, careful angle changes that avoid sudden roll, and the discipline of breathing when the leader breathes. The ocean's calendar adds other rhythms, tides that tip prey layers even in migration corridors, moonlight that changes surface cues, storm tracks that announce themselves as long, low swells days before their winds arrive. A traveler built to read small, steady signals hears all of it, and the course adjusts by inches that added together become safe arrivals. Picture a cool thread coursing through warmer layers, too subtle to see from a cliff but present as a felt seam. A body designed for long distances finds that seam and slides along it as if the water itself offered a rail. No signposts rise from the surface, no mile markers break the blue, yet the timing works. The bays appear on schedule, and the next season's ledger opens with food in reach. A faint emerald sheen gathers where the sea is thick with life, and the skin writes its quiet ledger in films and scars. On bodies that pass through cold, productive water, diatoms attach in thin coats that turn flanks greenish, until a change of region or a spell in warmer layers loosens the grip and the color fades. The hue is not uniform and not permanent, but it tells a watcher where an animal has lingered. Near upwelling fronts, along ice margins, inside bloom belts that coat anything smooth with microscopic glassy grip. Under that transient paint lies the permanent map. Blue whales wear mottled pigmentation, marble-like swirls of slate and pale that differ enough from body to body for identification at distance. Photographs of the dorsal ridge, the small aft-set fin, and the flank pattern feed catalogues that can follow an individual for decades without a mark or a tag. From those archives, life histories emerge, which summers a traveler chose, which winters it returned to, which years were generous enough to thicken the back, and which were lean enough to leave edges sharper. The surface is not quiet in a biological sense. Small copepods graze the film. Remoras attach in low-pressure zones along the belly or near the axillae of the flippers, feeding on stray particles and sloughed skin without meaningfully changing hydrodynamics. True barnacle gardens, common on some other baleen whales, rarely take hold here, a difference linked to skin chemistry and to behavior that offers fewer long, slow surface spells in warm, nearshore water where larvae thrive. When abrasions occur, ice grazes at high latitudes, gear brushes in busy coasts, or a predator's teeth rake across flanks, the record remains for months or years. Linear impressions may betray past entanglement. Crescents along the peduncle can record a near miss from a hunting group. Shallow pocks may mark healed infections. None of these notes is decoration. Each stores context about risk along a route that seems empty to the eye. Below the skin, layers transition quickly. The outermost epidermis is thin by absolute measure, a flexible film that tolerates stretch during engulfment. Beneath it, a fibrous sheath spreads load across the great curves of throat and belly, preventing local tears when the mouth balloons open. Then comes blubber, the living storehouse that insulates and finances the year. Thickness varies by season and by success. After high latitude summers, the mantle fattens and the body's lines soften. During migration and early lactation, the same layer thins as energy leaves bank and enters motion and milk. Chemically, the store reflects diet. Krill-rich periods deposit fats with signatures researchers can read later, matching bodies to feeding grounds, even when photographs fail. The vertebral column runs like a keel, but propulsion concentrates behind the last rib. The muscular peduncle, the narrow, powerful base of the flukes, houses fiber types, balanced for the work. Fast twitch bundles that fire during accelerations ahead of a lunge, and slower, more economical bundles that carry cruises across quiet stretches of sea. Tendons anchor those fibers into the fluke's stiff connective plate, so each contraction becomes motion rather than wasted heat. Observers sometimes read that power in the surface spring when a whale initiates a dive, a brief bend at the tailstock, then a smooth lift as the blade-shaped flukes angle down. Shedding may accelerate in warm regions where surface time increases, and mild abrasion from suspended particles scours the film. The result is not an annual molt, like a seal's dramatic change, but a quiet refresh that keeps the outer layer clean enough for flow to stay orderly. Microtopography on the skin-minute ridges and grooves cooperates, guiding boundary layers so turbulence stays low during gentle motion. Along the rostrum, tactile hairs remain as reduced vibrissae, relics of a land ancestry, but still capable of calm, sending touch information when edges of the lip brush prey layers or when contact with another body occurs during close swimming. Sensation does not end at the lip. The entire surface is wired for feedback about pressure and shear, information the brain can convert into small trim changes that matter at scale. A tiny roll correction at the right moment keeps water flowing cleanly along the flank during a banked turn into a patch. A fractional angle change at the fluke root prevents a stall that would cost energy on the next stroke. None of this looks dramatic from a cliff. It looks like steadiness, but steadiness is the sum of many small messages delivered in time. The skin's chemistry participates in defense. Natural antimicrobial compounds help keep opportunistic colonizers in check, where small scrapes might otherwise invite infection. Oil content near the surface can change slightly with condition and season, altering how films adhere and how light scatters from the flank. Under ship noise, some bodies spend more time just below the surface, rising to breathe and sinking again without rolling high. In those periods, sun exposure patterns shift, and skin tone can change subtly across weeks, another soft record of behavior written in pigment. To a trained eye, the exterior tells the year's story. Thick, even blubber, and a smooth peduncle suggest abundant feeding. Sun-bleached patches on the dorsal surface hint at long days near low latitudes. A ragged notch on the trailing edge of a fluke, photographed 10 years apart, can anchor a chronology that spans oceans. Scientists blend those clues with biopsy chemistry, drone-based body volume estimates, and thermal imaging to produce health snapshots that do not disturb the traveler. The goal is not curiosity alone. It is management that responds in time, rerouting traffic when many bodies carry fresh gear scars, protecting particular bays when mothers arrive with young frames still carrying pale fetal folds along the flank. In quiet water, stand at a respectful distance and the body becomes legible. The green film says bloom, the pale marbling says identity, the scar across the shoulder says a narrow escape one winter. The peduncle's breadth tells how much fuel remains for the road to come. The whole is a chart layered on a moving hull, one that can be read by cameras and by hands that once handled lines but now steward lanes instead. Imagine a coastline traced in faded ink on parchment, faint to anyone passing quickly, clear to anyone who learned how to see. That is the map the skin keeps, turning sea and time into a record a listener can carry home. A narrow lance of noon glare touches the wave crest and slips away, and breathing becomes a craft practiced on a moving stage. At the surface, exchanges are brief and thorough. A forceful vent sweeps stale air and water vapor in a tall plume. A quick draw refills compliant lungs whose tissues are thin enough for rapid diffusion. The cycle repeats in measured pairs until internal sensors, oxygen tension, carbon dioxide, pH report margins restored. Then the head tilts and the body folds downward, not in a dive for spectacle, but as a continuation of routine. Below, the clock changes hands. The dive response narrows vessels in peripheral beds, redirecting flow toward organs that cannot tolerate deprivation, while other tissues accept reduced delivery without injury. Heart rhythm slows and stroke volume adjusts, delivering enough without waste. Oxygen stores are held in several accounts: the air that remains after exchange, the blood's loaded hemoglobin, and pigments inside muscle fibers that bind oxygen where it will be spent. As depth builds, air spaces compress, reinforced airways parcel gas into areas where absorption cannot accelerate dangerously. The architecture is not a hedge against failure. It is the ordinary shape of success at pressure. Dive length depends more on job than on pride. Foraging dives end when a dense layer has been sampled efficiently, or when the oxygen budget demands an ascent. Transit dips are shallower, a rhythm that favors steady motion. Inspection descents, probe thermoclines, or prey ribbons briefly, and return. Surface series reflect those purposes. After a productive sequence at depth, a whale may breathe more frequently for a minute or two, restoring gases while stabilizing acid-base balance. After an exploratory dip, only a couple of exchanges suffice before the body angles down again. The pattern looks calm, even when the arithmetic is exacting. A listener at distance hears the breath as punctuation in a long, even sentence. Calls align with these cycles in subtle ways. Low notes can originate well below the sunlit layer, where transmission improves and range extends. When a sequence begins at depth, phrases may repeat across several descents and ascents, with timing that matches the work rather than a metronome at the surface. The deep sound channel serves as an acoustical corridor, so a body moving along it can send and receive over long distances, even when the surface is noisy. In quiet basins, a single phrase carries farther than any wake line can announce a presence. Where traffic hums, signals shift in timing or emphasis, sliding into less crowded bands so the message survives. Sleep, in strictly terrestrial terms, is impossible for a fully aquatic mammal that must surface. Rest, however, is achieved. Logging at the surface, long, quiet floats with minimal movement, alternates with automatic breaths that arrive without full arousal. At depth, prolonged glides after short propulsion bouts reduce muscle work while the body maintains orientation and pace. The brain likely parcels rest into many short episodes, spread through days and nights, adjusted by need and by opportunity. Unihemispheric sleep is well supported in toothed whales. Evidence in large baleen species is sparse, and the pattern here appears less about shutting down half the cortex and more about orchestrating low-demand intervals that thread through a schedule dictated by breath. In polar summers, when daylight lingers or never ends, the circadian system loosens its grip on light cues and follows feeding cycles instead. Hormonal messengers still mark time: melatonin, cortisol, metabolic signals, but their peaks slide to match prey. Prey layers obey tides and moon phases as much as clocks set on land. Internal waves focused along slopes lift bands of small crustaceans toward shallower depth on certain flows and scatter them on others. A forager tracks those displacements not by guessing but by sampling, tuning dive angles, and ends to where the densest return comes from instruments in its head. Eyes that read brightness, gradients, ears that hear distant sea state changes, and tactile sensors that register shear at the lip when the edge of a cloud is near. On spring tides, the work may cluster around particular hours. On neap tides, the window stretches. A diary written from a cliff would show irregular hours and regular intentions, short flights of breaths, then long vanishing acts, then another short flight. Gas handling cooperates with the clock. Collapsing lungs at depth sequester residual gas in reinforced spaces and reduce further nitrogen uptake, tempering decompression risk even after repeated descents. On ascent, expanding volumes vent naturally as pressure falls. The blow at the surface is not only exhalation, but a small safety valve for the next inhale. The trachea's separation from the esophagus allows feeding near the end of a dive without confusing food and air. In cold layers, warmed blood maintains lung function when the next cycle begins. In warmer belts, heat loss is lower, and surface time may shorten slightly because thermoregulation is cheaper. Juveniles arrive with the same hardware, but not yet the same software. Their breathing sequences are shorter, their dive budgets conservative. With time and long lanes measured under a mother's shadow, they learn the cadence that trades safety for efficiency in correct proportions. They also learn caution at the surface, where ship tracks cross migration roads. In places where speed restrictions are enforced, the breath intervals of a passing whale look undisturbed. Where fast hulls dominate, those intervals can tighten as the animal treats the surface like a risky crosswalk. The difference is not subtle in a life that must repeat the same movement tens of thousands of times. Some days the ocean sets an easy clock. Swell is low, wind small, prey layers steady and predictable by hour. The breaths arrive like the minute hand on a simple watch. Never rushed, never late, only occasionally adjusted to account for the slow lifting of a patch through the afternoon. On other days, the sea writes in erratic hand. Squalls darken the surface and push layers into unexpected depth. Currents shear familiar ribbons into segments that need reassembling dive by dive. Then the schedule bristles. Surface series grow longer, and glides at depth stretch to feel for structure where vision cannot help. Through all this, internal time stays true. The next ascent begins before the threshold approaches. The exhale clears fully. The inhale finds the right volume. The valves close. If you could see the invisible dials, they would show safe margins preserved with room to spare. Think of the second hand on a silent clock moving across its round, not in clicks but in a smooth sweep. From across the room, it looks effortless. Only up close do you notice the hidden teeth turning so the hand never stutters. Breathing for a giant that lives by water is like that sweep quiet from a distance, precise at its gears, and faithful enough to carry a life across oceans without missing its mark. Thermal balance begins with scale. A large body sheds heat more slowly per unit mass than a small one because surface grows slower than volume. Yet seawater steals warmth far faster than air, so insulation and internal production must work together. The blanket under the skin blubber does more than store fuel. Its structure and thickness tune heat flow. After generous feeding, the layer deepens and conductivity falls. After long migrations or months of nursing, the layer thins and the margin narrows. Temperature gradients develop from core to surface. The shell over flanks and back may run several degrees cooler than the muscles powering motion beneath, a deliberate buffer that reduces total loss to the surrounding cold. where blood travels out to the fins, and fluke the places with high surface-to-volume ratios. Vessels run in paired bundles that pass close to each other. Warm arterial blood heading outward shares heat with cool venous blood returning inward. The exchange preserves core temperature without wasting as much energy warming the sea. When the environment softens in temperate belts, valves open in small cutaneous channels, and heat can bleed more readily to prevent overheating during high work. The system adjusts within minutes, guided by thermal receptors in skin and deeper tissues, and by neural commands that alter vessel tone. Fuel for this furnace comes largely from lipids derived from prey. Digestive tissues keep their throughput even in very cold water. Warm blood perfusing the esophageal and gastric regions prevents chilling of enzyme systems, while boluses of krill-rich slurry arrive. The molecular machinery breaks chitin's tough polymers and frees proteins and fats at rates that keep pace with the animal's demands. Absorbed energy moves into immediate use and into storage, with biochemical signatures that later tell scientists which feeding regions contributed to a whale's reserves. In productive polar summers, the engine runs hard, converting short windows of abundance into months of warmth and motion. In leaner periods, metabolic rate shifts downward within the safe range for a mammal that must still move, breathe, search, and if nursing manufacture milk with extraordinary energy density. Water balance and salt load must be solved at the same time. The kidneys do this at scale through a reniculate design. Many small repeating units, each a miniature kidney with its own cortex and medulla, multiplied to process large volumes efficiently. The arrangement excels at concentrating urine, conserving water while excreting nitrogenous wastes from a diet heavy in protein. Because seawater is not inhaled, and because prey fluids are closer to internal salinity than the ocean itself, net salt burden remains manageable. Still, the system corrects for surges tied to heavy feeding or to shifts in diet composition, and it does so without needing long surface rests. Extremities cool by design. A flipper's surface temperature can sit well below core values without injury, sparing the interior and making the outer layer a sacrificial buffer against the sea's pull. Skin glands and oils help preserve surface integrity, where repeated exposure and friction from water flow would otherwise roughen and invite loss. At ice margins, where chunks drift and collisions happen even at slow speeds, the outer layers must also absorb impact without tearing. Healing proceeds under cold conditions, aided by high perfusion and by immune defenses that keep colonizers from turning a scrape into a wound. Thermal stress does not only come from cold. During intense feeding with repeated accelerations, deep expansions of the ventral pouch, and rapid closures muscles generate heat quickly. In temperate water, dumping that heat is easy. In frigid belts, it risks local hotspots unless routing adjusts. The same countercurrent networks that prevent chill can be asked to carry heat out to shells where it dissipates gradually. If a lunge sequence extends, some whales briefly visit slightly warmer layers between deep bouts, not to rest lungs, but to keep tissue temperatures within safe bound. The behavior looks like patience. It is also maintenance. Climate variability changes the thermal problem by moving the food. In years when sea ice retreats early or returns late, the timing and intensity of blooms shift, pushing krill peaks into months or places that do not align well with established routes. A whale that must travel farther to find dense prey burns more fuel to stay warm along the way and arrives thinner to the next stage of its cycle. Management that protects key feeding corridors and ice edge belts thus acts indirectly on thermoregulation. Shorten the distance between pantry and nursery, and less heat needs to be generated during transit. Observers see the result in aerial body volume estimates, thicker mantles after seasons when prey was abundant along traditional shelves, sharper outlines when storms or warm anomalies scattered life. Physiology gets no credit for drama here because there is none to offer. The engine lights every day and burns evenly. Think of a banked hearth in a stone house, coals glowing under ash while wind presses against shutters. The room stays kind, not because flames leap, but because the slow heat never stops. In water that would pull warmth away all day and all night, a body built for distance and depth keeps its own weather by design. Blue whales do not move carbon alone, but their life histories stitch several pathways together so that elements cycle differently when they are present in number. Start near the surface, where light is strong enough for microscopic plants to grow. In much of the sea, growth is constrained not by sun, but by nutrients. Iron, in particular, limits productivity in large ocean regions. When a whale feeds at depth, then surfaces to breathe and to void waste, it carries iron and nitrogen upward in forms plankton can use. The soft, drifting plume is not refuse in ecological terms. It is a localized fertilizer applied where mixed layers and light meet. Within hours to days, phytoplankton respond, taking up carbon dioxide as they divide. Some are eaten quickly and passed along to grazers and then to larger animals. Some sink after short lives, exporting carbon to layers that will keep it out of the atmosphere for years or longer. This upward movement of limiting nutrients while feeding layers often sit below the light zone has earned a mechanical name, the whale pump. But the mechanism is biological. It depends on where food is taken, where breaths occur, and how the animal's own metabolism packages and releases elements. The scale is not a single dramatic event, but the sum of small additions across seasons and across many bodies. In regions with heavy whale use and strong stratification, satellite chlorophyll maps sometimes capture faint green wakes after busy periods, signals that later fade as grazers catch up. Researchers combine those remote views with direct sampling in tracks left behind by surfacing whales to link cause and effect more tightly. Tracers show iron concentrations many orders higher inside a fresh plume than in surrounding water. And they show rapid uptake by microbes that anchor the base of the food web. The ledger has a downward side too. At the end of a life, a whale's body becomes a dense parcel of organic carbon that sinks rapidly. On the bottom, those remains fuel communities that include clams, worms, and bacterial mats. Communities that can persist for years as lipids in bone slowly decay and feed chemoautotrophic partnerships. The carbon locked there stays out of circulation far longer than the carbon that passed through a copepod the same day. Between these endpoints, upward nutrient return at the surface and downward export at death, flows connect trophic levels laterally. Predators track whales because fish and birds concentrate around their feeding grounds. Scavengers track them for the same reason. Food web models that once treated great whales as scenery now treat them as moving nodes whose presence changes rates. Historic depletion altered these pathways. When most adults were removed from basins, upward nutrient transport declined, and productivity patterns likely shifted at scales hard to measure, without records that do not exist for chemistry. The recovery now underway in some regions has begun to restore these subtle fluxes. A growing population means more surfaces fertilized, more wakes that nudge phytoplankton over thresholds that turn light and trace metals into blooms, more larvae fed, more krill produced in subsequent seasons. The effect is not uniform or instantaneous. It rides on ocean physics, mixing strength, layer depth, eddy residence time, and on regional food webs that may have reorganized under pressure from centuries of change. Still, The expectation that giants contribute to stability by redistributing limiting elements has gained evidence with each study that tests it. Management decisions incorporate this broader function slowly. Ship lanes and fishing regulations protect bodies. Climate agreements and nutrient policies protect habitats. And in recent years, carbon accounting has begun to consider living pumps and sinks as more than anecdotes. To fold whales into those ledgers properly, scientists estimate fluxes, how much nutrient one defecation adds to the premend. Mixed layer, how often such events occur in a region, how much extra primary production results, how long that carbon stays at depth once exported. The numbers vary widely by place and season, but the direction is consistent. Where whales live their full lives, the ocean functions differently than where they are absent. The same caution that keeps the tone gentle in this channel applies to claims. No single whale tips the planetary carbon scale. Many whales, supported by resilient prey and quiet corridors, nudge local cycles in ways that amplify over years. Consider a tall building with a slow elevator that never shuts down. It is not fast, and it will not thrill anyone, but it connects floors that would otherwise sit apart. People move, ideas spread, work gets done. The building as a whole becomes more than stacked rooms. In the ocean, the elevator rides are iron and nitrogen going up with breath and coming down in snow. With the additional ride of a final fall few will see, a traveler that seems to move alone in blue water is, chemically, part of traffic that helps the sea keep its balance. Carbon stories often prefer spectacle storms that mix the upper ocean. Phytoplankton blooms painted green across satellite images, ice melting into turquoise plumes. This story is quieter. It happens in plumes that last minutes, in wakes that a camera can miss, in bones that settle to dark plains where lights visit rarely. Yet the sum of quiet work matters. When whales return to a coast after long absence, fishermen sometimes report better years a few seasons later, not because whales fed fish directly, but because the ladder between deep prey and surface plants got extra rung. A net thrown near that ladder finds more life climbing. In the end, accounting turns back to movement. The whale eats where light is poor and nutrients are rich. It breathes where light is strong and nutrients are scarce. It dies once and writes a last entry that will be read by communities, specialized for that archive. Between those events, it carries a little iron and nitrogen again and again to edges of water, where those gifts change the rate at which the sea turns sunlight into living tissue. That is not romance. It is arithmetic done softly by bodies built to travel. Amber fades across an old harbor, and the ledger of a century opens, where slips once held steel. Industrial whaling did not arrive as a single ship. It arrived as a system. Steam turned chase into certainty, and explosive harpoons collapsed distance between hunter and body in seconds. Factory decks rendered blubber at sea, removing the old pause that once forced fleets ashore and gave herds time to thin the risk. Catches rose in step with these tools, and blue whales, largest, slowest to replace themselves, absorbed the steepest withdrawal. Shore station logs, pelagic tallies, and the sober arithmetic of genetics point to a baseline far higher than any modern count can yet show. The shape of the decline differs by basin. The Southern Ocean spiraled fastest under floating factories. The North Atlantic folded earlier with shore-based effort. The North Pacific dropped in waves, tied to shifting markets and wars. The common feature is pace. Removal ran faster than birth for too many years in a row. The end of that era came as a decision more than a rescue. A moratorium on commercial whaling, adopted by treaty and enforced unevenly but firmly enough, withdrew the largest hand from the account. With the drain slowed, the slow biology of a long-lived mammal could begin to matter again. Yet, recovery curves refuse drama. A blue whale does not mature in a few seasons, and a population does not rebuild without several cycles of safe feeding and safe travel. In places where prey remains reliable and hazards fell, like some stretches along the eastern boundary, currents counts climb in gentle gradients, detectable across decades rather than summers. Elsewhere, growth hesitates. Busy shipping lanes overlay migration roads. Fixed fishing gear fills narrow shelves. Chronic sound turns once quiet wintering water into a low hum that masks calls meant to travel far. Each of these pressures has a remedy. Each remedy works best when tied to real maps rather than to calendars. So, management learned to draw new lines. Speed restrictions around known corridors reduce lethal strikes without halting commerce. Moving lanes a few miles seaward in hotspots separates hulls from breath plumes by margins that matter. Seasonal sanctuaries protect parts of a route during months when mothers arrive with calves that cannot spare energy for evasion. Where those measures match current whale use updated by tags, photographs, and hydrophones, the effect appears clearly in incident logs. Where protections remain glued to yesterday's routes, collisions return like a tide. International waters complicate the picture. A mother that passes from subantarctic edges, through temperate belts to tropical lee shores, crosses jurisdictions with different aims and tools. Only agreements that reach across boundaries can keep a corridor intact from one edge to the other. The ledger holds more than counts. It holds time restored to acts that require it. A year spared from entanglement becomes a year in which a calf can nurse through its most vulnerable months. A quiet wintering bay becomes a schoolroom where a young animal learns the calls, angles, and pacing of its population without interference. A feeding season free of repeated disturbance accumulates not only fat, but resilience. With better reserves, migrants arrive to their next stage with choices rather than needs that force risky shortcuts. These gains are measurable in body condition images and in survival estimates, but they are also visible in the ease of a surfacing sequence, unbroken by sudden course changes near propeller turbulence. Communities that once depended on whales for oil and baleen have been rewriting their lives in parallel. Wharf sheds hold research gear now. Small boats carry cameras and notebooks. Former lookouts log sightings for science and for visitors who value the presence of a giant more than the product of its absence. Language shifts, too. The same narrow inlets that were called grounds now keep the names but hold different futures. None of this erases the weight of the past. It makes a different kind of weight that holds policy to the present tense. Memory remains a tool, not a wound to be reopened nightly. The caution that threads through this story is not fear, it is proportion. Even where counts rise, the distance to historical baselines is large. Natural mortality still occurs. Storms upset prey at scales whales cannot avoid. Climate moves fronts that once aligned neatly with calendar months. Workable plans accept these truths and place human-caused risk as low as practical, so the ocean can supply the rest. That often means small, repeated choices rather than grand gestures. Keep speeds down where breaths appear. Mark and modify gear so loops ride lower in the column. Route the noisiest hulls away from wintering arcs when low voices matter most. The virtue here is steadiness. Some elements resist easy graphs. The cultural knowledge carried by the oldest females' roots, favored eddies, safe passages in bad weather, was pared down when those bodies were taken first. Rebuilding that knowledge takes more than numbers. It takes time lived. The return of consistent arrivals to certain bays hints that this transfer is underway again, as calves that once drafted in those lanes now lead others through them. In that sense, patience is not a posture. It is part of the biology being protected. A blue whale is not a project with a finish date. It is a relationship between an animal and the water that shaped it. The best management keeps that relation free to continue its quiet work. We talk about ledgers because the mind likes balances. What went out, what comes back. Here, the entries include lives that will never be counted because they went missing before counting began. Yet they also include an accumulation of ordinary days, the kind that do not make reports, during which a body fed without interruption, traveled without a strike, called without being masked, and gave birth in a place where heat loss did not threaten a newborn. Those days are the compound interest of a good policy. They do not announce themselves. They show up years later as a line of breaths on the horizon that used to be 2 and is now 3, then 4. Harbors at dusk keep the past close because muscles remember work even after work changes. The wooden pilings, iron rings, and sloped slips carry stories told by people who labored honestly under different instructions. To honor that labor now means guarding what remains and allowing it to grow. The science is clear enough to act without panic. The tools exist and improve yearly. The only requirement that version of the sea sets for us is simple. Move at the animal's pace. Measure carefully. Adjust where the map says to. Accept that the curve you want will show itself on a scale of years that outlasts any single plan. On evenings when amber turns to gray and small waves tap against stone, the lesson becomes plain enough to place in a pocket. Extraction happened quickly. Repair will move like water on a slack tide, quietly, steadily, in a direction you can name without needing to be loud about it. The map is drawn. Now the ear opens. Let's hear what the ocean tells us. A pale tuft of spray drifts away from a flank, and a small black disc loses its grip and slides into the wake. The tool was no heavier than a handful of shells, held on by gentle suction and a dissolving link of sugar. It has done its work. Inside, a clock has counted depth every second. A sensitive ear has captured low phrases and the rush of water against the body. Tiny gyroscopes have traced each roll and pitch. A thermometer has watched the sea cool with descent and soften with ascent. When a crew collects the tag at the surface, they recover a history etched in numbers, the angle of a throat pleat opening, the exact moment a lunge began, the pause before the baleen closed, the quiet drift after. Work. The next climb toward light. These records turn one life into a readable line without a bruise or a scar, and the whale continues on, untroubled by a device that is already becoming another piece of floating dust. Far above, a small aircraft follows a measured path. The camera it carries looks straight down. 2 bright dots mark reference sticks fixed to the fuselage. Software measures the distance between them, and then the distance from rostrum to notch along a body that passes beneath. From thousands of meters, length becomes a number with small error, and width at known points becomes a measure of condition. Over months, the same body expands and narrows like a year's slow breath. After a strong feeding season along a shelf front, the outline rounds. After a long migration, the edges sharpen. These shifts are not judgments, they are notes. A bay that adds a little volume to most visitors earns a quiet star on a map and the attention that follows. At sea level, a different instrument listens for what eyes miss. Hydrophones, lowered from a drifting ship or anchored to the sea floor, keep vigil through fog, storm, and night. They count phrases in registers too low for the human ear and record the background the whales must push through, the distant grind of propellers, the sharp signatures of airgun pulses that search the seabed, the crackle of rain. Over seasons, a basin's voice becomes visible on a screen as bands of energy that rise and fall with migration and with work. Analysts match patterns to populations and then to months, building calendars from sound. When a particular sequence grows, they know arrivals are underway. When an interval fades, they know bodies have turned toward other edges. Sometimes a research boat draws gently near, and a small dart taps a flank. The sample it collects is no larger than a pea, a curl of skin and a thin thread of fat. In a lab, those threads tell stories numbers alone cannot hold. Molecules reveal family ties and distances traveled by ancestors who learned these routes long before the present boat was built. Fat carries traces of substances that persist too long in the world compounds, designed for human uses that flow downhill, across rivers and out through estuaries, then ride the currents until they lodge in living tissue. Concentrations rise and fall with place and age. Managers can watch those trajectories and decide where reductions have worked and where they have not. The same fragment shows the chemistry of fuel in storage and the kind of prey that supplied it. You can read a season in a ribbon no wider than a grass blade. Newer approaches take their water from the path itself. A bottle dipped into the green line behind a surfacing animal holds fragments of shed cells and microbes that traveled with it. Environmental DNA makes those fragments legible. Tests confirm presence when the body has already gone, and confirm identity when fog has made photographs impossible. Along a transect in poor weather, those bottles can be the only encounters that matter. Weeks later, a string of confirmations draws a thin dashed line across a chart where a person once wrote, "Maybe." The word is erased. The path stays. All these measurements mean little without the sea they sit in. So researchers fold them into maps of what the water is doing. Satellites gather skin temperatures and hints of pigment that mark floating gardens. Drifters ride currents and transmit the flows that move life around. Slopes focus tides into underwater waves that lift prey toward easier depth for a few hours. Altimeters feel those waves from space. Models take these fields and ask simple questions gently. Given where fronts lie and where wind has turned the water over, which shelf will be rich this year? Given how far the ice edge has retreated and how hard the winter storms mixed the upper layers, when will a belt become worth visiting? The answers do not decide where a whale goes tomorrow, but they give those who draw corridors a better sense of where lines should bend. The rules that govern this work stay close to the bodies they touch. Teams watch behavior before they approach. If a mother draws her calf close, they let the moment pass without a tag. If a chorus begins in a quiet basin, they keep engines low and drift until the phrases end. Permits set limits on numbers and durations. And field notes record more than data how the sea felt, how closely birds circled, whether a hull noise echoed oddly between two cliff faces. The ethic is not romantic, it is practical. Information gathered at the cost of stress rarely describes ordinary life accurately. The best curves come from days so uneventful that the only marks in a notebook are the times a device entered the water and left it. Data arrive as calm stacks, depth against time, speed against depth. The angle of a roll against the moment the mouth opened. On a screen in a dim room, someone traces a finger along these lines and says, almost to themselves, here the body coasts, here it turns a shoulder and widens the pouch, here it closes, and the world outside is shut out for a second. Here it glides again. Another monitor shows a spectrogram with low steps rising and falling at regular intervals. Someone else touches the band and says, that phrase is back this month, longer than last winter, deeper than the year before. The room is quiet, not because of awe, but because careful listening requires it. The excitement comes later, when lines from many lives and many years agree. The ocean is busy with weather, ships, and small tasks. Tools must work inside that busyness. A tag that falls away by itself keeps the deck light. A drone that launches from a short arc of calm between gusts returns with the measures needed, and not a frame more. A buoy that hears across a season, sits with its antenna just above chop and sends a short note to shore each day that says, "I am still here, still listening." A program that keeps all these notes in order and allows anyone with permission to compare years, helps the knowledge outlast the team that first gathered it. The whale does not notice the software. It notices that the boat that tagged it once does not come back in the night, and that the next day's work at depth is the same as yesterday's. None of this replaces the human habit of names and memory. A photographer remembers a notch on a dorsal ridge and a pale scatter along one flank. Years later, the same outline rises within range again. The image joins a catalog entry and a date. Below, a note says, "Good volume after summer on the shelf." That note guides nothing on its own. Many notes like it help decide whether a speed advisory should be extended a week, whether patrols should watch one corridor instead of another, whether a cable-laying vessel should shift a temporary route slightly offshore on mornings when the low register of a particular population fills the water. Good listening becomes safety when it changes small plans. What is gained from all this patient work is not control, it is alignment. The people who wish to protect a life that moves beyond sight most days learn to set their schedules to its pace. They know, with growing precision, when a passage will fill and when it will fall quiet, when a bay will host newborns, and when it will return to weather and birds alone. In response, engines slow for a month, nets ride a meter lower, surveys choose different hours. The sea looks no different to an eye scanning a horizon. Inside the water, the difference can be a body that does not need to turn hard in front of a bow, a calf that saves a day's worth of energy because a ferry passed a mile farther out, a mother whose calls travel a little farther because a set of pulses paused at dusk. To work like this is to accept that reward comes as absence. No collision recorded this season, no entanglement reported from this inlet, no unusual spike in cortisol in a small, the sample of blubber collected months later. Those zeros are not empty. They are the proof that a set of modest, careful tools has joined the ocean without pushing it. In a world that often celebrates loud, visible changes, the quiet ones need their own circle on the map. A small tag that falls away, a camera that returns with exact lines, a microphone that sits through a storm and sends a single chime home at sunrise, a vial of water that confirms a presence no one saw. Put enough of those together, and a corridor becomes safer by increments, like a long path whose stones have been laid flat one by one so a traveler can pass in the dark without stumbling. The tag that began this page drifts on the surface until a hand lifts it into a net. A ribbon of numbers inside dries. In a lab, someone opens the file and watches blue traces climb and fall like tide lines. They make a copy for a shared archive and write a few words. 3 deep foraging bouts near the front, extended surface rest, 2 brief songs at depth. The note will join thousands of others. The whale has already gone over the next slope and out toward whatever the evening offers. It carries nothing from the encounter but its own breath. The record remains. Tomorrow, a small decision somewhere else will lean toward caution because the line on the screen helped it do so. That is all the listening ever wanted. A sea glass haze settles where the horizon used to stand. Rain knitting sea and sky into a single tall wall. Weather happens in minutes, but the changes that now shape the whale's room are paced by seasons and by years. The water that fed a route for decades warms in a matter of summers. The winds that once kept layers mixed fall quiet for a string of winters. The ice that used to extend like a sleeve around a continent retreats early, and light arrives when patterns of diatoms and small grazers are not ready to match. Krill respond in their own slow arithmetic. Reproduction depends on under ice, blooms, and on the timing of spring's rise. Survival through winter depends on fat carried from productive months. Move the calendar, and swarms become patchier, or their peaks arrive weeks off from the calendar mothers held. In one sector, bodies that once built stores along a familiar slope must travel farther for the same gain. The cost is not measured in spectacle. It appears as thinner outlines in photographs and as longer surface series on days when the distance between good patches grows. In temperate belts, heat concentrates along currents that used to flicker in narrow lines and now broaden into warm domes. Marine heat waves last weeks to months and roll under ships as if the sea wore a cloak too heavy for its season. Plankton communities adjust. Species that once favored cooler, iron-rich filaments yield to others that prosper in stable, warm layers. The change climbs ladders, small grazers shift, fish distributions follow, predators appear in unexpected places. A whale that relied on certain ribbons during late summer finds lean marks where it learned to expect density. It tries other shelves, other edges where fronts bend. Some years the search is short, others it is long enough to show in body condition by wintering time. These adjustments are not signs of failure. They are evidence that a life designed for distance and patience is doing what it must to stay inside the moving shape of opportunity. The chemistry of the upper ocean changes as well. More carbon dissolves into surface layers, and the water grows a little more acidic decade by decade. Shell-forming plankton feel that shift first. Their ability to make and maintain armor weakens where carbonate ions grow scarce. Krill larvae that shelter under winter ice and graze on early season films must build their bodies in this water. The effect is not uniform. Places with strong mixing and fresh iron supplies sustain productivity despite chemistry. Places that stratify too easily and receive little, dust, or upwelled nutrients dim. In the dim zones, whales pass like quiet shadows, sampling, then pushing on. Oxygen minimum zones expand along tropical and subtropical slopes as warmer water holds less gas and as stable layers block replenishment from above. Krill and fish pull back from those shadows. The whale integrates that absence by lifting foraging effort into bands where oxygen remains higher and prey still gathers. At larger scales, oscillations in winds and pressure shift storm tracks and upwelling strength. Seasons tied to long-standing patterns, one that traders once trusted with sales schedules, arrive wrong-footed and wear unfamiliar faces. A memory built across generations does not break under such pressure. It bends. Roots detour around a year's poor corridor and reacquaint themselves with older edges that become useful again as currents alter their lines. Risks that ride with human traffic change shape with climate too. Where sea ice thins and retreats, new lanes open for hulls that move sound into basins that winter once kept quiet. Exploration of the seabed under that new access brings pulses from arrays that map layers with compressed air. The low register these tools occupy overlaps the bands a blue whale uses to send a simple call across distance. In response, voices shift, subtly, pace changes, intervals widen, a phrase lightens its lowest step. The message still carries, but not as far when the floor of the water hums. On long routes, a little less reach can become separation. Dynamic rules can help. When regions turn noisy, managers can ask certain surveys to pause for windows when migrants pass, or steer the loudest efforts around months that belong to newborns and their mothers. That kind of adjustment needs instruments and willingness more than it needs new law. The material of our lives enters the water even when hands never throw a thing overboard. Small fragments from clothes and tires and ropes move offshore in plumes. ride currents into convergence zones and fall through the column. Baleen filters do not select against them. Some ride in with prey and pass through bodies whose design never expected such fibers. The concentrations measured so far are small inside giants, and most fragments leave quickly, but the long view is uncertain. The same caution applied to other persistent substances applies here. Prevent the entry where we can, because once the ocean has mixed a new thing into its slow, wide loops, undoing is not how time works there. Disease ranges move just as species do. Microbes that stayed within warm belts extend into latitudes where whales and their prey did not meet them before. Harmful algal blooms add a different hazard. Toxins produced during certain blooms concentrate through food webs and can alter behavior and physiology. Baleen whales have rarely shown acute poisoning, but the possibility thickens in years when heat sets the stage for blooms that last longer and cover more ground. Monitoring programs that link algae to wind and water help warn when an area is turning. In response, guardians can sharpen the focus on corridors mothers use and adjust human noise and speed there to remove at least one layer of pressure from a place already showing strain. The answer to a moving world is not to draw harder lines. It is to draw lines that can move. Dynamic management matches protections to where whales actually are, not to where they were last decade. A speed advisory can turn on when hydrophones hear a particular call motif in a region and turn off when the chorus clearly leaves. A protected polygon can expand around a front that satellites show sharpening and then relax when the front collapses. Fishing rules can tighten when a set of detections shows calves arriving early and loosen when the season slips late. These tools are not about constant change. They are about responsive steadiness. The rules hold their purpose even as they slide over the chart. Technology helps, but the work remains human. A captain checks a daily map that blends detections with forecasts and chooses a lane a few miles wider of a shelf where calls grew through the night. A port authority announces a seasonal adjustment a week earlier than usual because wind and water brought the feeding belt forward. A field team that planned to tag in one bay stands down for a day. After an unexpected run of heavy weather, pushes animals into a corridor where traffic already demands more attention from them. None of these decisions will make a headline. Together, they lower the ceiling of risk to a height a long-lived animal can walk under without stooping. Climate stories often arrive as alarms. In this channel, they arrive as measures and as pace. The world the whale inhabits is not collapsing. It is shifting in ways that require the same qualities. The animal already has patience, range, the willingness to travel a little farther when a shelf grows thin, the ability to listen for edges hidden inside distance. Our part is to keep the rest of the room kind while that work happens. That means engines that pass slowly where breath appears, corridors that turn quiet when low phrases need to carry, gear that rides where bodies do not travel, and policies that accept that calendars will slide and then write that acceptance into their clauses. There is relief in such a calm answer. It does not deny loss or promise guarantees. It says only that steadiness scales. A whale moving through grey rain at the boundary between two water masses does not require a perfect ocean. It requires an ocean where the next slope still holds food, where the next mile of surface air is still safe to break, where the next low note will still reach an ear that knows it. Picture a traveler who once took one train by habit, now checking a small screen and choosing another platform because the line shifted this week. The destination remains. So does the patience to reach it. In that patience, a giant finds room to continue its ordinary work. And our work is to keep the platforms open and the announcements clear enough that the choice is easy. This creature has seen centuries pass like seasons. It has sung songs that travel farther than any voice made by man. Songs that carry stories of migration, hunger, birth, and loss. It has known the pressure of the deep, the thin light of dawn, the shadow of ships, and the ache of a changing ocean. And still, it moves calm, vast, certain, reminding the world that greatness can be quiet, that strength can be gentle. Tonight, the whale rests in its long circle of breath. The sea holds it the way time holds everything worth keeping. You do not need to see it to believe it. Some lives are too immense for the eye, meant only for the heart to understand. So, close your eyes now. Let your breath find the whale's rhythm, slow, deep, forgiving. The ocean keeps its promise. The world still turns in blue. Good night, may your dreams drift with the whale, through endless calm waters and stars that never fade.